Good evening, and a very welcome to you all on a cold night. My name is Louis Geiger. I'm the commissioning editor at Wits University Press, and I'd firstly like to thank a few people for this occasion. Firstly, Nikki of Chiesa de PAZZO LUPi. I still can't get my tongue around that, but we're extremely happy to be here, and it's really lovely. So thanks for your generous hospitality. And in her absence, I'd also like to thank the other Nikki, Prof. Nikki Falkov, Professor at Wits and also Director of the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies, for her support and for making this collaborative event possible. And we are very honoured also to partner with the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies. We have some representatives of them also here. Gathering tonight during International Pride Month is the perfect moment to celebrate the joyfully diverse collection of pieces. We hope readers will embrace the analytical freedom this volume offers. By presenting a multitude of styles, voices, approaches, and positions, the book encourages us to think about sexual and gender diversity and fluidity through a distinctly Southern lens. Furthermore, in a dark time of state-sanctioned xenophobia in South Africa, Wits University Press is extremely proud to publish a collection that aims to spark curiosity among English speakers about Lusophone Africa. Several essays also explore South Africa and Mozambique's historic and current corridors and linkages, and the complex, often painful shared experience of migrant labour, connections that transcend South Africa's hardening borders. We are fortunate this evening to have an exceptional panel with us to help us explore the specific cultural and historical paths that have allowed Mozambique to be more open about sexuality and gender fluidity. Please allow me to introduce them. Francisco Miguel, the primary editor of Queer Mozambique. He's on my left-hand side. He's a social anthropologist. And a few years ago, in recognition of his research excellence, he received the 2020 Colin Murray Award for postdoctoral research in Southern Africa, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at Queen's University in Canada. He is an active member of the African Studies Committee of the Brazilian Anthropology Association and has held fellowships at the State University of Campinas, Brazil. His research focuses on sexuality, gender, health, and the LGBTQI movement with Lusophone Africa, within the Lusophone African context. Then next to him is Marc Epprecht, a well-known figure in South African academic circles. I mean, I'm sure many of you have also encountered him in other contexts. He's a professor in the Department of Global Development Studies at Queen's University in Canada, and he's currently also a visiting research professor at the History Workshop here at Wits. Marc has published extensively on the history of gender and sexuality in Africa, including the prize-winning Hunsho Chani, I hope I pronounced that correctly, The History of a Dissident Sexuality in Southern Africa. He has also received a couple of years ago the Desmond Tutu Award for outstanding contributions to the study of sexuality in Africa. Then next to him, the interlocutor for this evening is Caio de Araújo, and Caio is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Wits Institute for Social and Economic Research, and crucially, he has also served as the lead investigator for the Gala Queer Archives oral history projects, both in Mozambique and in Angola between 2019 and 2023. And then finally, we are extremely grateful to welcome Ekaterina Zibrova, who has graciously stepped in at the last minute to moderate this evening's session. She's filling in for Paula Dinés Brandini, who is unfortunately stranded in Mozambique at this very moment, and Paula also sends her warmest wishes and regards. Ekaterina is an associate researcher at the Wits Centre for Diversity Studies, where her work focuses on critical diversity literacy and the politics of identity. It's my absolute pleasure to hand over the evening to Ekaterina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you all for coming here to sharing this event. In the middle of the week, I would say in the middle of winter, but you're here for, I believe, our warm and fascinating conversation about a really amazing book about queerness history in Mozambique. And for the start, and I need to repeat it again. So I'm a last-minute replacement of Dr. Paola Prandini. This is my middle name for today, a last-minute replacement. But I made myself familiar with this book. I'm really enjoying this morning with my morning coffee. So I found it really fascinating, and I have a lot of questions to ask. And also, I'm country of my origin is Russia, and I had a chance also to ask queer community, Russian-speaking community, what they have might be what they can ask, what they have. Some question or something to our queer community here in South Africa and Mozambique, and I have 4 or 5 questions also, and I'm really happy, and it's really honored to be here today, and also build a dialogue between spaces and time and a lot of regions, what people call global source, global north, or etc. So, let me start with the editors, please, and also that you, Caio, also can relate to any questions that we're going to raise today as one of the first insider and outsider, how we discussed it a bit earlier while preparing to this launch. From the origin of this book and the idea, what you put, how you center Mozambique in a multi-layers, multi-dimensional, and also if you can address the fascinating thing about this book, so it mostly based on archives, on other documentary history, what the one of the forewords here, and I really love it, and I as a moderator, I'm going to use a chance to cite it. As you read these chapters, it's Danila da Silva foreword for this book. I invite you to think about silence not as absence, but as a political strategy about documentation, not as an objective record, but as a contested terrain about Mozambique, not as an exception, but as an example of the complicities that exist across the continent when we look beyond reductive narratives. And I find this amazing thing about the approach, which mostly working with archives, that the question that also in my studies, and I studied indigenous identity in Russia, how it's this constructive nature. If your history is documented, doesn't mean that you exist, or it's not documented, that means that you not exist right now. And maybe you can address this question as well. Please. You can choose and be in a dialogue, and also not forget about that.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin with a few acknowledgements that I should say are anything but very informal. First of all, I want to thank Marc, my friend and intellectual partner, for more than a decade. Thank you for embracing this project so generously, for believing in it from the very beginning, and for investing not only your knowledge, your time, but also your energy and resources. Quite simply, this book would not exist without you. I would also like to thank the Wits University Press team here in Johannesburg, and all the people who worked behind the scenes on Queer Mozambique, Louis, Corina, Kristen, Inga, Veronica. Thank you for believing in the importance of this project and for transforming a collection of texts, ideas, images, dreams into this beautiful book we now hold in our hands today. Many thanks also to the contributors to this volume, some of whom were with us in Maputo last week. Each chapter adds a unique piece to a complex and fascinating mosaic of queer experiences, histories, and debates in Mozambique. The richness of this book is above all the richness of the contributions. Finally, and I say with this particular emotion, I want to thank the LGBT friends I have met in Mozambique since the very beginning of my research, from the very first time I was there a decade ago, as well as LAMDA and other Mozambique organizations. They welcomed me and now Marc with a generosity I will never forget. Before I speak about the book itself, let me offer just one more acknowledgement to PAZZO, which funded my postdoctoral fellowships in Brazil, Mozambique, and Canada. And it was thanks to that support that I was able to develop this project and indeed meet Marc in person at Queen's University. And it was actually towards the end of my time at Queen's University, when I was already packing my bags to return to Brazil, that the idea of this book first emerged. Do you remember that, Marc? At the moment, I realized something that now seems obvious to me. There was already an extraordinary body of scholarship on gender and sexual dissidence in Mozambique. Historical and contemporary research carried out by both Mozambican and international scholars stretched across more than a century. More than that, it was a field that continued to grow, mature, and generate increasingly sophisticated reflections. It was then that the book's subtitle came to me almost all at once, from the minus to the manas. I immediately liked the sound of it, but more importantly, it seemed to encapsulate a particular history, a history that moves across different times, language, identities, and ways of living differently. A Mozambican history, certainly, but one that is also deeply connected to broader debates about gender, sexuality, and belonging. I had the impression that this trajectory remained relatively unknown outside specialized circles, and above all, insufficiently visible within a field of African queer studies that has historically been dominated by scholarship from Anglophone countries. I shared the idea with Marc, our Dean of African Queer Studies. From the beginning, he showed enormous curiosity and enthusiasm for what was happening across the border. Very quickly, the project ceased to be my idea alone and became a collective endeavor, and it's that collective endeavor that we are now celebrating here today. I'm not going to present a synopsis of the book. Honestly, I believe Danilo, the guy who has already wrote the foreword, done beautifully and insightfully in his foreword. Marc and I sought to contextualize the chapters in the introduction, but it was Danilo who managed to capture this remarkable sensibility, the broader significance of his work. So I would like to conclude by returning to what really matters. This book was born out of encounters. It was born from conversations, friendships, research, serious and demanding work, debate, hospitality, and many forms of collaboration that crossed continents and institutions. It's the result of a network of people who believed that queer experiences in Mozambique deserve to be studied, documented, and taken seriously. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who made this possible, and to all of you who choose to be here this evening, including our discussants, Ekaterina and Caio. Caio has also been an important reference to me, and I'm delighted to finally meet him. We are both Brazilians, but it's the first time I meet him in person, so after many years of online conversations. I hope that Queer Mozambique will be only the beginning, not only of new books, but also for new research, new stories, and new voices. Because when a story is told, it comes to exist in a different way in the world. But when many stories are told, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to be forgotten. So thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, Francisco. Yeah, I remember that meeting very well on the corner, and I thought we were saying goodbye after a successful tenure there for a winter at Queen's, and then Francisco says, yeah, I want to write a book on this, and he even had the title already, and that's a cool title, yeah, and I said, congratulations, you're going to write the book, so great, and I said, but I want to write it with you. No, I had no ambition to do a book on Mozambique myself. I don't speak Portuguese, I barely read it. But I noticed in my earlier research the presence of Mozambicans all over the archive, everywhere. And there were always interpretations of, explaining Mozambican behavior for another audience. And I always said, wait a sec, why don't you ask Mozambicans? Someone should do that. And I think Francisco responded to that, and hence the invitation to collaborate. So, yes, it's been a great journey. I want to just reiterate everything that Francisco just said. Thanks to everyone for coming here, and thanks to the press, and thanks to you all to come. It's been fantastic. Of course, the contributors. It's been a joy working with people. I'm just going to add one more. My funder for some of this, taking me to Maputo this time, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. I don't know what else to say exactly. I think the archive question is going to come up again and again and again. But I know when Francisco proposed the book, originally I said, okay, I will be the background editor and help with this in the management. And Francisco kept asking me, but surely you have something. Did I say no? Or
I said no, you were gonna...
Oh, okay. Yeah, he kind of pressured me. So, all right, I said, I'll go back to the original archives from KwaZulu-Natal, from Zimbabwe, from Pretoria. I'll just look over the stuff that I had done for Hunguchani and some other stuff and see if I look at it differently 25 years later. And sure enough, I did. I saw things, because at that time I wasn't thinking specifically Mozambique. I was thinking Zimbabwe, actually. And then when I went back and read it over, and we're talking like 100 years, really, since the first publication in French, looking back, thinking, what are the Mozambicans saying, rather than what are people saying about the Mozambicans? And it made me look at the same archive in a very different way and see things which I didn't have. And the passage of time also made a big difference, because I read words which, at the time I first read them, I didn't understand, like Itonga. The way it was spelled in 1868, I didn't understand. That was a reference to basically Mozambicans. So from the so anyways, so that was a really great experience for me, going right up to the newer stuff. Again, being written about the migrant labor system in particular, and it might come up. I don't have a problem with Charles Van Onselen on a personal level, whatever, but it often comes up in his writing, and among other kind of Marxist historians trying to explain this phenomenon. And there's several phenomena in the book. Actually, we wrestle with other authors, like, why is Mozambique such an incredible outlier in the whole of the continent in public opinion about, would you like to live next door to a gay person? It's off the scale, even compared to South Africa with the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you explain all that? And so I'm coming up to basically recent scholarship and asking, why are you interpreting it that way, rather than maybe asking people like Danilo. Danilo, by the way, was the founder of Lambda, and we were very honored to have him write the preface and be there at the lunch yesterday, or not yesterday, last week. Okay, so anyways, thanks. I haven't answered your question.
I mean, I'm not sure I should be answering questions you're posing to the book.
Maybe you can just address as an outsider who for one of the first reader, and who actually the first reader you hear.
Well, I'm not sure if we should be disclosing that I was one of the reviewers for the book for Wits University Press, but I mean, I don't think that's a secret. But anyway. Well, your question about how archives are an exercise in world making as opposed to an exercise in recovery. I think a lot of the work on queer archiving in the last 20 years, they will show that by building a queer archive, you are making queer worlds, as opposed to retrieving stuff from history or retrieving a past that is already there, right? That is particularly true of oral histories, so people dealing with or using a mixed method approach, so doing research in colonial archives and then oral history research with living queer folks. But in addition to that, I just wanted to say something. I think it was raised during the preliminary remarks about how one of the potentials of thinking about queerness from a site like Mozambique is that it inevitably brings up the issue of migration to South Africa specifically, and how do we incorporate those experiences of migration into our contemporary understanding of rainbow nations, especially in the current context of anti-foreign sentiment in the country. Now, the flip side to that, and I will refer here to a Mozambican researcher who was my professor in college, Maria Paula Menezes, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year, she used to say, Mozambique is a colonial invention, as any nation is a colonial invention. There was no Mozambique before the Portuguese. And I'm actually curious, Mark, I think I would assume that the way migrants, quote unquote, Mozambican migrants were referred to in the archives was on the basis of language, and probably referred to as migrants from Portuguese East Africa rather than Mozambique. I don't know. I mean, I'll be curious to hear about that. And then I'm wondering whether talking about queer Mozambicans in historical perspective wouldn't be an exercise, or queer anything, queer South Africans, queer Zimbabweans, wouldn't that be an exercise in doing history backwards, in which the end goal becomes the nation or becomes citizenship, right? So we're talking about a subject position that will ultimately belong or mean to belong in the contemporary nation. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a very political project to be able to say this is a history of queer Mozambicans, and on the basis of that history, queer Mozambicans deserve citizenship in the present. But also, I think we need to question these categories, because questioning categories is the stuff of queer studies, not reifying categories, but questioning them. So I think that's my answer to your question about how archives make up stuff.
And the importance of archives. Yeah, but actually, that speaking in terms of the introduction of the editors, that's why it's because we are talking about history, and there is a very nice as it frame. The demand for proof of homosexuality in history is a problematic requirement, or even more radically. Someone asked, read the book. Who needs history? In other words, it is necessary to be critical of the demands, as you guys said, for queer history, particularly in the African context. Here we propose in the book, the book proposed, the offering queer Mozambican histories in the plural is neither an attempt to establish a single truth, nor to present a fixed linear sequence, nor to fulfill activist demands for ancestors. Rather, we hope this history serve the purpose of fostering deeper and broader knowledge of this country and its diverse people, and call for more research. Actually, that's what I found also useful and opened a new horizon, because in this the introduction of this book, and also the editors put the horizon of the future research. The one book cannot answer a lot of questions, As I told to my students, one text solves one problem, even if it's a book. It's also, like drawing the contour of the future research. That's why I'm asking about history, and then who documents, or who writes history, when it's written, in what context. It's really it's like when we look through these layers, we can understand like more, because this book traces history of queerness in Mozambique since 1860, as I please correct me when I'm wrong. I mean, it's very, very deep in a history as I can see it. That's why I'm kind of questioning, raising the question about history and archives, and the role of archives in building the picture of understanding something. And by my next, it's not a question, but if you can address so you not just center Mozambique queer history in the book, it's there is some approach when we talk with our people in the terms that they understand, But the one of the interesting features of this book, that this you refer to your words in the introduction, that you center Mozambique in a dialogue with Mozambique-South African relationship, and also in a dialogue with Mozambique and the African continent relationship, where the place, and not that's it. It also you places the queer Mozambique history in a dialogue, what people call global north and global south. It's not just about Mozambique for Mozambiqueness. Yep, and also you specifically mention and highlight that it was important to you to write this history and provide this insight in English. So there also you like keeping in mind this audience who you talk and then your authors talking through, yeah. And maybe you can address this, the place of Mozambique, the place of queer history, the whole queer community of Mozambique, the place in a global dialogue. It might be only the continent dialogue. What does it mean being queer, and why you center Mozambique history here?
Yeah, thanks so much. That's great. Is that all? Yep, there we go. I guess the easiest response to that, and the one that is my knee-jerk response, is living in North America. There's a relentless discourse of homophobic Africa. It's just the worst place in the world.
Africa is homophobic.
Africa, yes, yes. And so, for me, one of the fascinating things that I've always observed as a person who hasn't traveled to Mozambique very much, but it's in the archive, and anecdotally, it's all over the place, that, it's not so bad, actually.
They actually free than you guys.
Yes, and I've had someone say that exact thing to me, not in Mozambique, but in another country I don't need to name, but in a similar state of underdevelopment. And that to me was kind of interesting, because there's this discourse, again, in the West, the more modern you are, the more urban, the more developed, the more liberal you become. And here we have one of the poorest countries in the world, with by far the more, and I don't think liberal is the right word, but more accepting of diversity, and say, that's our family, and we're going to love them no matter what. So I found that really important for me personally to get into the kind of the global north discourse and say, stop talking about Africa as one place, and stop talking about it as some kind of primordially homophobic, and meanwhile connected to that all these other isms. It's not. So if nothing else, I hope this can contribute to tripping up that discourse. Just to respond to Caio's question, and then I'll pass over to you. Yeah, there was no Mozambique in the archive. Absolutely. The word never occurred, except maybe the Mozambique, and that's it. In Zimbabwe, they talked about, it's an Inambane boy, or it's East Coast boy, or by, that's the extent of it, or by their tribal designation at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and Portuguese East Africa, that's it. And there were some other derogatory terms that came up I don't have to mention. Maybe I'll make one last point before I hand over to Francisco, and it's a nice segue. One of the things I also really was attracted to working with Francisco on this, near the beginning, so there's a whole bunch of BA honors theses at the university that are being plagiarized by outsiders who are coming in. They're not accredited, they're not online, and they need to be documented or at least acknowledged in print somewhere. And I thought that was a really honorable thing to do. And the one big chapter that is kind of historiographic gives those honors dissertations a place of honor, as they deserve. It's incredible. Here in one of the poorest countries in Africa, you have honors BA students doing things that students probably, even at Wits, would be a little bit shy to go into. It's quite extraordinary. And so I'm really proud of Francisco for going there with that.
Yeah, I just want to say some words. First of all, this nation-centered approach, we excuse ourselves in this direction, but this is something that when we are doing research nowadays with the LGBT movement in Mozambique, they are nation-centered projects. So I different from other countries that nationalism seems to has to do with homophobia. The LGBT movement in Mozambique is quite clear for them that they want to make their nation. They want to participate in the nation project. So, just to give you an example for you, the language, the Portuguese. Once I was talking to the director of Lambda, and I asked that there was a kind of material to teach people how to say the correct words in the semantic field of homosexuality. And I asked him, why are there so only Portuguese words? Why didn't you search for native or African language words?
Pre-colonial kind of.
Yeah, pre-colonial. And he responded to me that that would be a nice project, but they didn't want to enter in discussions of the preference of this language or the other language. They really want to make Mozambique still nation united within the same language. And this is quite different from other parts of the continent. And I try in a specific paper that's not here, we just mentioned this, but I try in another paper explain this, and my hypothesis, there is still in the elite of Mozambique a sentiment, a loose tropicalist sentiment. They are, just like the Portuguese, not exactly the same, but because they even critique the Portuguese colonialism project, but they are still trying to compare themselves with other nations, and especially for former British colonies. We are saying we are more tolerant, we don't have these barbaric things that happen outside this country, we are civilized, and and from a specific perspective, it's the same of the Portuguese. We are a small nation, a poor nation, we don't have the resources, but we still, we are the most moral of this region at least. So I think the leader of Mozambique, who is still defending this tolerance, this theocratics, they are the most tolerant place. And this is not only from Mozambique. Cape Verde has the same discourse. So Lusophone countries have this kind of same discourse. They are tolerant with this. This has some empirical evidence. They have been decriminalizing the violence against nature. But I believe that there is a nation project that's it's a kind of heritage from the Portuguese way of governing, and they simulate it in this movement of the LGBT movement. They want to fight for resource in this precarious market of the global south, and they find this way is the better way to achieve their objective, which is to stop the violence against LGBT people, to improve their lives, etc. So,
That's quite fascinating. That I've never heard that the queerness might be as a part of national project. I mean, that's modern that we live in a rise of national state building projects. It's like a super accelerated right now by wars. We cannot also not mention it. It's quite interesting that, and also I'm the questioning like, okay, there's a being that we are more tolerate, like patience, and we embrace this old dimension of diversity. Does it? Looks like it's like challenging. Is it also a tool for fighting for sources? I mean, for NGO, like this market, and it's quite actually if it's a mark or I don't know characteristic of the heritage of a specific colonial project, because there are a lot of colonial projects here. So I'm from the country with the Russian colonial project, this country with the British colonial project, the Mozambique is a country of Portuguese colonial project, how there are different colonial projects that they created the different discourses, and how the different groups marginalized by this colonial project and these colonial discourses, how they now, try to manifest themselves as well through some, terms. That's very interesting for me. Yeah, it's like it's something interesting. It is the same in Brazil. And we're talking about the colonies of the one empire, the Brazil and Mozambique. Is there a same, I don't know, like dialogue, and is the queer people in Brazil also imagine themselves as a part of a nationalistic project?
Yeah, Brazil has a different history from Mozambique. Of course, we were colonized, settler colonization much earlier. So there are some differences between those two experiences. But the lustropapialism myth, and I call it because it's a myth, it does has resonance in Brazil too. The Black movement has been criticizing this from the 80s, since the 80s, a lot. This is the 1930s Gilberto Freire's ideology and theory. So the Black movement in Brazil has been criticized it a lot, has gained the battle in Brazil, I guess. Nowadays it's very hard to defend any lustropapialism prisoners nowadays in Brazil. And I'm not talking that Mozambique are defending lustropapialism. I feel it's more like a heritage that is not completely clear. It's like a way of controlling and governing things, that they try to simulate. And in Brazil, we have this discourse of a tropical land, very sexy, very open to all kinds of sexuality since the beginning, since the arriving of the Portuguese or native peoples, indigenous peoples that were naked and everybody was just like a party. So we have this kind of narrative, but also have one of the worst scenarios of LGBT genocide. It's the highest rate of trans murder in the world. So we have the highest rates in Brazil, and we have the highest rate of search for trans people in porn websites and murders of it. So this is the complexity of Brazil. I don't think this happens exactly in Mozambique. It's another place. We have their own story. But specifically with this way of governing that London and other organizations think, I think it's quite this Portuguese heritage we both share.
Oh, thanks for that. Caio, maybe you can address some of the centering Mozambique and this in a dialogue, the global north, global south, and also the African continent, and I love that you says that about the image of like queer people, like there is a specific image in the north and specific image in south. I mean north, global north and global south. And what you were talking, it was about these images, yep, and also there's the false dichotomy between what it means civilizing, places, and progress as well. We are more progress that mean that we are, like admiring queerness, and if you are backward, it means that you cannot do it. And also the providing the true image of queer, of what is mean being queer in African continent, and also through the history, through archives. Maybe you also can address this, what you've seen, what you can, like your personal and academic as well insights.
Well, I think Mozambique is a wonderful context to speak about global connections, because it is a very porous formation, historical formation. It is deeply entangled to Southern African history, especially South Africa, as was already mentioned. It is deeply entangled to Indian Ocean networks, and I think that also has an influence on the ways in which queerness is experienced. Of course, it has a huge coastline, and I mean, there's a huge scholarship on queer eco-criticism around the beach as a place of queerness. And all of that is relevant to this. I'll give you an example because of the Indian Ocean influence, and especially in food, curry dishes, and so on. Usually there is this term called Maria Raja, which basically means, you know, Raja, the curry powder? So that is basically meant like, oh, someone, one of the trans girls, they're using too much makeup. So they are Maria Raja because of the, you know, it's on the yellow side. So, and of course, the fact that you have a South Asian minority with queer people, a Muslim community with queer people, and all of that. So Mozambique is a space of flux, and that's another reason why I'm suspicious of the national framing. Although I understand you mentioned it is a political project, and I agree, it is a political project of the LGBTI movement. Tolerance is also a political project of the LGBTI movement. It is a conscious decision to say that Mozambique is a tolerant place, to be able then to say to the government, you have no reason to deny us rights, right? So it becomes, it enables a rights-based argumentation with government interlocution. Of course, some people also, for them, tolerance is a lived reality, as Francisco just mentioned. However, one, I think this is changing quite drastically. There is a lot of talk of the anti-rights, anti-gender movement in Mozambique, and how that is, in many ways, closing civic space for sure, but also for closing possibilities in queer activism. If you recall, in the last elections, the military was on the street, killing dozens, if not hundreds of people. So, I mean, forget sexuality, what kind of tolerance can you have in politics, in general, when that is happening? So, and secondly, my feeling is that tolerance is a result of a gay-centric LGBTI movement, because the brunt of the violence is suffered by gender-diverse bodies and transgender people that are killed and violated. And I think transgender people would be less likely. That is not to say that many of them will also say, well, Mozambique is so much better than Zimbabwe or whatever, but they will be a lot less likely to buy into the, well, it's a tolerant space. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Different nuances of the tolerance in a one place, like different nuances. Who are we more tolerated? Who are we not? Like like same hierarchies that any corner of the world.
And I know that there is currently a transgender group in Mozambique that is running a project precisely. I think the title is Against Tolerance, and it is precisely about documenting rights violations and violence against transgender people, because it is understood that the discourse of tolerance, one of the most direct effects is to invisibilize violence, especially against the trans community.
And also this dichotomy between tolerance and love. Or we tolerate someone, we kind of ready to love, ready to embrace the experience, yeah? Or we just can tolerate them. And we have ability to tolerate, but not love, not embrace, not accept, and whatever. Okay, you have something to address? before we move to the question to the audience?
Thank Caio for bringing that up. People were being killed on the streets that we were walking just the other day, and it seemed invisible. Actually, you would never know this happened in this place.
I mean, many South Africans don't know about it. I'm curious to hear if everyone here was aware.
I'm curious to know if everyone was aware that during the last elections there were massive riots and tanks on the streets and people being killed. Okay, cool. Okay. We are in a very informed room. Okay.
So I thank you for bringing that up. And my little intervention, going back to the global north-south kind of thing, one of the pet peeves, I would say, with the global north discourse is to kind of idealize things like, okay, maybe romanticize and latch onto, so Mozambique is this and that, without any reference to the political economy that changes over time, by the way. And it's a kind of really, really irritating thing that comes up over and over and over again. And you can talk about Foucault and Judith Butler, but tell me about how much money is being sucked out of this country right now, and who is coming and chopping down that forest, and where's it going? So we try to do that a little bit. Obviously, it's not our main thing, but I think it's something we want to put on the agenda. The next people who are going to follow up in Portuguese or whatever language, in Chinese, come on, they're there. So come on, get on top of this and start asking those kind of questions in conjunction with, tolerance questions.
Yeah, that's we also ended any discussion that were the money and to whom they belong, who belongs, who owns the money. Yeah, and true decolonization, it's economic decolonization. Yeah, not imaginary thing that we are, like free or whatever. Okay, before we're moving to the question to the audience, using a chance being the last minute replacement, yeah, I recall my middle name for today, I'm gonna ask a question from Russian-speaking lesbian community, queer community to you. While I'm asking this question, please prepare your questions. I believe you have a lot of things to ask. It's actually, this question is kind of the same that the short discussion that we now raising about this place of any queer community in a global dialogue or whatever, global scheme of things. Okay, so there's a question. So I need to translate from Russian. Какие проблемы? Okay. So there are kind of Western European activists and actually activistki, female activists, and they think there are some problem more important than other, but it's not true. What kind of problem more important, and what the Western and European female activists are wrong about this problem? That they think they are crucial, but it's not. It's far from crucial. There might be the whole global let me call it dialogue, communication between global north and global south, and there are that from Europe they think that it's really important, but here in a real place it's not as important as they think. Maybe you can all address it, Caio.
No. I just found
It's a Russian-speaking lesbian community asked this morning about to relate to this book. The person from the global north, but with a perspective, okay?
What I hear, and not necessarily from Mozambique, it's from Zimbabwe or whatever, the priority in the global north is you have to come out and you have to be solid and
Yeah.
your identity. And that can be, if you're going to be out, you can't be a fervent Christian or a Muslim because those are homophobic. So you have to be true to your this hard line of identity.
The issue of purity again. What they invent in Europe, the purity, this.
So that's something I observed really early on in Zimbabwe. That people, they're deeply, deeply Christian, and they'll go to the church, and the pastor will be demonizing them literally and humiliating them in public, and yet they still go because it gives them something. So that was my impression, that need by the global north activists to show,
Kind of false
demonstrate
dichotomy.
a performance of purity. That's not there so much, but it is.
I just want to add something that it's a current project I'm in now. But I don't want to compare exactly the feminists from Europe, but I want to compare the trans movement in Brazil and in Mozambique. Just an example for you that's I'm working on now. In Brazil, we have this, trans movement has this kind of political strategy to assume an identity, that it's an essential identity. I was born this way, so I was always like this. Trans woman or trans man. And for example, they changed the name, the masculine name, they were going with the masculine name, they changed. And this masculine name, if it's her is a trans woman, they call it the dead name, or the name of the dead. So they don't talk about this name. It's kind of an offense to say this name publicly. And now, I'm in Mozambique, and from some time, I'm observing that a lot of trans women in Mozambique, they are not really worried about their masculine names. They use it. So in Mozambique, most of my interlocutors has like 3 names. A secret one, which they were born with, probably in Xangana. A second one, which is a Portuguese name that you use in the hospitals, the schools, etc. And it's a public name. And now the trans trans, they have a third name, which is now it's conformed with the gender they occupy. So, and I was interviewing just last week some of them, especially in the hinter side, and I asked them, what about you have 3 proper names? Do you think this is confusing? No, I have one name to my nuclear family, I have one name for my friends and clients, I have another name to school. And this is something really nice because, as Mark was saying, there is an expectation that the subjects must be unified in one identity. And what Banastras are showing us is that you can be a fractal person. In fact, anthropological literature has been showing this for a long time. In a lot of places, you have fractal persons that are a lot of things, depending on the context. And not the context of a specific place or specific date, but as long as the day, you wake up with a name and you are treated like someone, and at the afternoon you are with other people in other situation, and you are, and all of these names and all of these adjectives is unified. They are not confused about it. So,
it's not a mark of oppression. It's a kind of tricksterism of being, and that
But this kind of way of being, if it was put into Brazil, for example, for my trans students, they feel they are crazy. They are not really engaging in the correct politics. That is to affirm you have an essential identity.
It's a part of politics of identity, that corrupt all of us, Caio.
I actually had a question for you guys, which is about the title of the book, Queer Mozambique. And that has to do with this discussion because the development of gender, sexuality, queer studies is kind of linear, right? First you have LGBTI studies, then you have queer studies. LGBTI studies is about reifying identities. So, for example, reifying, there are very clear boundaries to lesbians, gays, trans, etc. Queer studies is about questioning and settling those identities. I was curious when I saw the title of the book, Queer Mozambique, first of all, because queer is not really a word that is used. Very few people in Mozambique use the word queer, and it usually has a kind of elite connotation. People are making the kind of conscious choice to use the word queer, and that kind of has some sort of presumptions about modernity and like, I mean, whatever. People use LGBT, not even I, because also the intersex movement in Mozambique is practically inexistent. So I was wondering if the book is an exercise in research about people who are LGBTI, or if it is really about questioning the ways in which sexual and gender diversity are understood, transformed, questioned, contested, etc., etc. So on the question of why there is this disjunction between the fixity of sexual identities in the global north and south, I think it has to do with this timeline as well. The transgender movement in Mozambique started in the late 2010s. The first project focusing on the transgender population in Mozambique was in 2018. Mozambique doesn't have never had, partially because of precarity, a medicalized approach to transgender identities. I mean, one doesn't have access to gender-affirming care. One doesn't have access to legal gender recognition. And the reason why this shape-shifting approach exists is that people inevitably have to navigate the fact that their transness is temporary. It will eventually, they will eventually have to shape-shift again if they are going home, for example. Or if, I mean, whatever. That doesn't happen in Brazil because Brazil has a medicalized approach to transgender identity. One where there is legal gender recognition, and to achieve that, you have to claim a fixed identity. If you don't have access to it in legal medicalized terms. So perhaps the uniqueness of not only Mozambique, I was actually, sorry, I Googled because I couldn't remember the name, but there is a book by Kwame Otto on Ghana, which is precisely called Amphibious Subjects. And he's claiming that queerness in Ghana also has this amphibious subjectivity. So you're talking about fractal subjects, he's talking about amphibious subjects, which is about the shape-shifting nature of queerness. Because people cannot afford fixity, you know. There is that also doesn't mean that they would want fixity if they had the opportunity. There are many transgender people in Mozambique that they wouldn't want to go through sexual reassignment, even if that was possible. I had many conversations where people say, no, I'm very happy with my body as it is. I would never want to go through sexual reassignment, right? And that is part of the novelty of queer experience and queer studies in the global south, where we have these dynamics that are very normal. They are they are the normal, right? So when we're talking about things like medicalization, legal recognition, that is the exception. And I feel that the queer movement in the North now is transitioning into this questioning of boundaries, or very clear fixed identities, while this has been the reality here all along. I mean, surely Francisco also is aware of people that are, you know, the common ex-gay people. They were gay, then they're no longer. I mean, people are lesbians, then they are trans, then they become lesbians again. No problem. And I think that's the reality of again this kind of fractal nature of like amphibious subjectivity. It is okay to, and I feel that this is this is a main point of, I wouldn't say disagreement, but perhaps divergence between what queer studies or politics are in the North and in the South. Yeah.
Because of different approaches, because of different perspectives and different point of views, and yeah, and a tendency to see some region which is not Europe to like solid, unite, like the one image, you know, we must be the same. Like it's also like, yeah, repeating itself again and again. But so it seems to me that we're opening the question section from you. Yep, and if you can address this very deep, like from one side is this deeply methodological, yeah, because how you use this LGBT, well, like all this abbreviation, and also queer, is it the same for you or not? How you can address this, and also, and then we open the floor, okay, for questions. And check if it's you switch it off or you switch it off.
Yeah, I'm not going to substantively engage that, except to say a long time back, I forget when it was, I took issue with the word queer in a way that resonates exactly with what you're saying. People are coming from outside and putting this language on people who don't use it, who feel uncomfortable with it. And anyways, I've got 2 books. One it's got queer in the title, and now this has got queer in the title. So I don't know, I'm not distancing myself from that critique at all, but I'm going with the flow a little bit. In this case, I'm going to let, this was entirely your fault. You explain it.
No, it's true. People mostly don't use queer in Mozambique. I think I was trying with this, well, besides we talk about the using of the term queer in the introduction, we excuse ourselves and we share some sources that we are looking for to understand this category. But for me, to be sincere, queer here, it doesn't mean specifically sexual identity, but strangeness. Strange, something that is strange. And I think this is really in the cover. It's a Malagantana picture, very strange figures if you take a look. So I think the strange, the meaning of strange, it's what tries to catch the meaning of queer here. The strange to the Anglophone audience, the strange to us who are researching. This is a specific case. There is almost there are some strangeness in this case. So in a good meaning, you know, it's not strange, so it's terrible. It's strange, it's nice. There is something different here that we want to look for and to discover. So I think strange here means this kind of difference that we want to investigate. This is the first foot on the floor, in the door. So let's see what comes next. But I really don't think queer here means the identity queer, etc. It means strange. There is something strange that we need to go.
Yeah, it is so boring to be named somehow. Yeah, so it's really questions. You're gonna. Oh, yes. Thank you.
I see it.
Oh wow.
Sure.
So how we can offer approach so we can collect round the questions. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
Like 4 questions first round. 4 questions.
Let's see how many we get.
3. Okay, 3 questions.
Got one there
round.
and one here. Anybody else? So
Yeah,
far?
we have first 3. Yeah. So, please.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Good evening. I'm from Wickeds, same as Ekaterina. This is for both Mark and Francisco. Considering your positionality, right, how would you defend against potential criticism that your book is still a part of like a colonial construction or creation and not necessarily amplifying voices but speaking for them? Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Leo. I work on caring masculinities among migrant men. I'm from Zimbabwe and I'm at the University of Pretoria. So my question is really like a small one on to Francisco. You said something about, I think maybe it's like a clarification on, you sort of attributed the tolerance of Mozambicans to queerness, to a heritage that they took from the Portuguese. And I felt really uncomfortable with that, because I think Mark, even in your work, there's a lot of literature around this that talks about how indigenous practices that were on the continent, from West Africa to Southern Africa, were really, embracing, although there were challenges there. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think to attribute this to a heritage from an imperial colonial power or dominating power felt really like it was going in directions that that were really like a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know if you can address that.
Thanks. Thank you. Hi, I'm Melinda. I'm also a student at Wickeds. Thank you. And gosh, you've just all given us so much to think about. Thank you. And I can't wait to read the book. I particularly found your use of the word fractal really interesting. I hadn't thought about it in this context. I mean, I still sit thinking about the ability for people around me and families like mine to live in multiple worldviews very comfortably, but I think fractal is a much nicer term, so thank you. I just wanted to ask you what you discovered about the tolerance for children in Mozambique with different gender identities and sexualities. Thank you.
One by one or one?
I think question 2 and 3 are for Francisco. So maybe I'll start with the first one. The positionality thing was first and foremost in my mind when Francisco proposed this, and we should make every effort possible to bring in Mozambicans as participants. For reasons you can understand, that it's a difficult thing to do. And that was difficult in Zimbabwe too, actually, when I was there. Why would you, as a young researcher, do this work when the vice chancellor of the university you work at is the president of the country? So there are risks involved at that level. That was one factor that made it difficult for us to bring in Mozambican partners. But we made every effort, and I think the issue I just mentioned of Francisco, I would say, bending over backward to bring in and honor young Mozambican undergraduate students as part of this intellectual project, I think is inclusive. So yes, it's our names as the editors, and maybe I'll just make one last point, because, okay, this connects actually in a nice way to the last chapter, which is a photographic essay. And I hope I don't go on too long about this. Caio knows it very well. Caio, were you there at the conference in 2021? No, 21.
I wasn't there at the conference, but as you know, I wrote the article about it.
Yes. So, okay. Can you indulge me for, like, it'll take 5 minutes to tell this story. But it explains the last chapter. And I invited this person personally because I met her at the time. So the conference was called Sex and Secrecy. It was in 2023, I'm sure. Here at Wits.
Yeah. It was organized by Graham, right?
Yeah. Oh, Graham is there! Oh my goodness! Graham! Oh, yeah, well, welcome, Graham. Yes.
To call you out.
Of course, Graham. Yeah, no, Graham was there, and he knows exactly. So. Yeah, yes. Oh, Graham's there too. Yeah, man. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
I'm so. Yeah. Graham, you should be up here. Well, the long and the short of it is there was a young Danish woman who took photographs. She was embedded in the Manas community. And they had a long relationship, and they asked her to take pictures, and it was a good relationship. She came to this conference, Sex and Secrecy. The whole premise of it was, part of the problem was no one is talking about
HIV is sexually transmitted and that thing, and we have to get it out there. We have to break down these taboos. So yeah, she had this photographic essay, which was, to me, beautifully done, taking you into a kind of private space. And personally, I didn't even know these were manas until I got to the very last picture, and it was a full frontal male-bodied person. I was like, oh, okay, this is a really good teaching moment for me, and I thought it was brilliant. But the whole conference blew up in turmoil, and who is this white woman exploiting the black male body and blah, blah, blah. No, it wasn't that at all from my point of view, and most people, but we had to honor the moment, and we had a big discussion. The whole conference came to a grinding halt. It was in the Guardian, it was on the front page news. Okay. So anyways, one of the interesting things I learned after, and Caio wrote about, is this young woman, I think she was 20-something, right? It was, I would think, traumatizing, but she was pretty chill. And from here, she went down to Maputo and did the same show, and they were like, yeah, cool. It was like a really good, now where am I going with this? Positionality, that's the point. So yes, she, the photographer, was a Danish young woman, and her name appears on as the author and the artist, but it wouldn't be possible. And she honors the manas she lived and recorded, and it was a dialectic in every way, except all their names can't be on there for various reasons. So, I mean, the positionality thing, obviously, Caio and Francisco, you have a lot more to say. I, as a privileged white man, it's difficult for me sometimes to be in the role that I am, but it's also, for me, a great thing to be able to mentor and support young African scholars moving to do this work, which it's part of the big picture.
Yeah, thank you for the questions, for the positionality. The first meeting to create a Lambda, it was in 2006. They recalled a Brazilian anthropologist called Luiz Motti, which is a white guy, he's alive, and he helped to make this movement, this LGBT movement, start. So there is historical cooperation, especially between Brazil and Mozambique in all kinds of subjects, but especially for LGBT issues. So I really don't feel uncomfortable with this, because I've been going to Mozambique for almost a decade. And the first time I went there, I went to Lambda. There is a director of research in Lambda, it's a position in Lambda, and I talked to him and I asked him, what do you want? What's the main priorities for you? What you don't want? What do you want me to do? So the conversation is very, very honest, and I've been going there like 4 times now, and I really don't feel uncomfortable because they like it, they want it, and they just take a look at the Instagram page. They really want. I really believe in this, the possibility of this cooperation in many aspects, not only politically, but also of students that are going to Brazil, and we are mentoring, we are even be friends. I have friends of 10 years in Mozambique, so they really like it, and I have, this is very South African or maybe Brazilian kind of question, but in Mozambique, they are really not interested. I will tell you just one anecdote. The first time I was there, they asked me to download some movies so they could make some cine club sessions. And I was like, with this Brazilian setting, like, I'm going to find some LGBT queer movies of black people so they can identify with them, etc. And then I found some movies Brazilian and foreign movies. And I told them, well, I found a lot of movies of black LGBT queer people in Brazil, in the United States. And they were like this, why? Why? Because it's black. So it really, I'm not making a scene of this. It really didn't matter at all for them, you know? Of course, race is something that is alive. It has issues, but for my experience, it really is not something of trouble. I really don't experience any kind of trouble with this. They are really supporting this kind of job. And I have all over the book, there are a lot of Mozambican anthropologists, sociologists, black people contributing to this oeuvre. I have a special friend, Nelson Mugabe, who's a very, very nice anthropologist, Mozambique anthropologist. And we have been working like for years, doing research together, going to the interviews together, writing together for many years. So I really feel comfortable with this kind of issue. Well, Leo, right? Thanks for your question too. Once we were at ICA's Congress, the European Congress of African Studies, and I think it was in Cologne in Germany, and they made the same question. And well, just like Caio said, tolerance is a political project, and it's a political project that, like many political projects, wants to control the situation. So loose tropicalism was a project to not only a theoretical project. I mean, Freire was trying to understand the Brazilian society. He was a student of Boas from the United States. He was trying to understand the Brazilian society, so he thought that there was a kind of racial democracy in Brazil in the 30s, and he developed this theory of the mix of races in Brazil is another project different from the British, etc. So, but at political point, this is the control of a society. So if you say, just like Caio said, that there is no racism, you are invisibilizing that there is racism. So when the LGBT movement say that Mozambique is a tolerant country, and I agree with Caio that this is a gay-centered. I've been interviewing trans people, and they are less likely to agree with that. So I totally agree with Caio. But they are trying to control the situation. So I really don't think that in the South and the global South, we are totally free of hierarchies, of altering people. We have a lot of kinds of political projects that sometimes are evolutionist, colonialist, and people are trying with all these political projects. I really think that this kind of luso-tropicalist myth is so strong. It's so strong because if it was completely a lie, if it doesn't apply anywhere, so why does it resist? Still, it resists in a lot of minds. Not only the far right or white guys. It happens in Mozambique with the LGBT community. They are really trying to differ themselves from other countries, especially South Africa. I heard once that South Africa made a mistake in trying to put the rights from the up to down, like institutionalizing and making laws. Mozambique's activism, at least some of them, defend that we should first to convince society from down, from the bottom to the up. So we need to educate people. We need to convince the families. We need to make the population wants it. This is the assimilationist project of the Portuguese. There is a lot of studies around this. So how they didn't believe in laws to achieve their goals. They really want to make things from the bottom of the society. So I don't have this, I'm not naive
that because we are talking about minority in a global south context, that the completely progress, as we understand progress now, is the project they are following. They are experimenting with a lot of things, and the colonial heritage is one of them, and it's in place. It's still in place, in many places, here in this room. So they are really trying to do something that is different, and they are comparing themselves very similar to the Portuguese, what the Portuguese was used to do. So I think it's a technology of governance that is specifically LGBT movement is trying. And the fractal, fractal is a very known word or concept used in anthropology, like Marilyn Stratter and a lot of people that went specifically to societies of the Oceania, like Melanesia, etc., indigenous peoples. They started talking about this kind of subjectivity, which is fractal, or amphibious, like Caio remembered Otu's work. So it's a nice way to see that this politic of identity maybe is not the best for other contexts, that people are doing other things. So yeah, I'm still reflecting on it, so it's not done yet, but this is going to be my focus of the next weeks. Thanks for your question, Jim. Okay, this is something Caio has asked this a lot too to his interviewers. It's very common that, different from Brazil, for example, we have some texts. There is a specific anthropologist that he wrote since the 50s. Little childs, especially boys, they are used to be confronted with their sexuality since they are like 5 years, 6 years old, 7 years old at schools. Like their bodies are controlled. Like they talk about their genitals, etc. But in Mozambique, I always ask, for example, if a boy is too effeminate, like when very young, and the parents really don't matter at very young age. They are not controlling that from the beginning. If you are a teenager, you need to start having some girlfriends, and then you have to marry, and then you have to have children. So the parents will see like what's happening. But since the very first age, it's not the parents really are worried about. So they can experiment with for example, some plays like to be the mother and the father, and boys can be the mother. So parents are not really into it. They are free to express their gender and experimentations.
And then the second round of questions. We have one, we have second. Okay, two.
Hello everyone, thanks for tonight. Hopefully my question is going to be very short, and I'm hoping that my answers to my questions will be just as brief. Okay, so the first one being, I've been to Mozambique about 3 times in this year for personal reasons, because I just wanted to explore what it's like to be liberated in Mozambique since the decriminalisation of same-sex. And with that, I must say that I felt so home, if I may just say, in terms of experiences. And I think experiences, and they may not be verbal, but it was also just in expression, and also just in a physical approach as well. So that I want to speak to, like from a personal experience. And I'm thankful for that kind of liberation. And this is why I even came here tonight, because of it spoke to like personal experiences. But nonetheless, the second one being speaking to trans. And I think I want to be more educated in the sense that I'd like to think there's me that's lacking being educated in the whole, and I'm hoping I'm not offending anyone in the room, in the sense of transgender. I've distanced myself from a friend, and I'm hoping that in being here tonight as well, I can reunite with that friend as well in distancing myself because I lacked the kind of understanding or education relating to my friend. And just hoping that I'll get a little bit of advancement in terms of education, and I hope, as brief as my questions were, my answers will just be as short. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. The dilemma looks like sounds like more commentary than a question.
To a certain degree, and I'm opening up for debate to whoever may have a different kind of, and I'm hoping positive sentiment in saying that as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Mohammed Gitla. I'm from Gala Queer Archive. And I'm interested in noting the political unrest that occurred during, post the elections in Mozambique. I'm interested in knowing if you had to put precautions in place when working with members of the queer community, throughout the production of the book. And I'm particularly asking because in 2024, because there were so many elections throughout the continent of Africa, I was actually working on a campaign, an election campaign that aimed to increase the political participation of the queer community. And we really did get a deep sense of unsafety ahead of the elections. So even in the execution of the campaign, we had to redact names, blur out faces. So I'm interested in knowing that throughout the production of your book, did you also have to put in some sort of safety measures for the community that you were working with? And if so, what were they?
First, I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly or responding correctly. We do have a chapter.
That's incorrect.
Yes. I'll just say we do have a chapter in here which speaks to the trans issue from a kind of indigenous perspective to some extent, but with Indian Ocean influences, interestingly enough, and Islam comes into it as well. It's a mélange in which the transness of the subjects is interpreted in a way that basically emphasizes ancestral spirit coming into the body. So the physical body is just that, it's a short-term thing. But the ancestral spirits can come and go, and they can influence you in ways that everyone has to respect. Right? If it's a powerful female spirit that came into my body, people wouldn't question. I'm going to behave differently than I do now. So that's that kind of pre-scientific, if you want to put it that way, interpretation of what transness is there in society, and it is mobilized by people in strategic ways, which is quite fascinating. So there's a whole chapter on that in the northern part of Mozambique, actually, which is quite important too in the discourse, which usually centers on the south. In terms of the political violence, I don't know, maybe it would be a better place to respond to some extent. But the process of publication is really slow. And we weren't in everyday correspondence with people. We never, from my experience, never had any indication from anyone that there was a danger on any of this. The violence happened, and then it stopped happening. And like I said, we were just there. And I don't know, it's like actually when I lived in Zimbabwe, you had the police doing crazy things, but you still have to take your kid to school, right? And so it's a weird kind of experience. But I personally, and maybe Francisco could talk about that, in the production, we never had any indication of that being an issue. And of course, if it was, we would have responded.
Yeah. We have one experience. A colleague of mine, we invited him to participate in this project. He's a very good anthropologist, and he said no. But because he was getting some troubles with this, he was a bit sad because he thought that he had made a wrong choice in the subject for his career in Mozambique. So there are some subjects that are more important or more reliable if you want an academic career. So we invited him. It's really a shame he's not one of the contributors, but we mentioned him a lot, of course. But it's really sad. But he said that he was sad because he was not able to get a job because he has chosen to investigate this kind of subject. If he had chosen to investigate about health, economics, something like this, bigger theme, development themes, in Mozambique, he would be more successful in his job finding. So I think this is the only real case that the subject really blocked contributed to this book.
Which was before the political violence.
No.
So it seems that we all in that time also. So let's wrap up. And so I hope that the editors have addressed all your questions. If not, please approach them personally. Okay. And there is no any book without readers. So please read. And thank you very much for being with us today. And thanks all organizers and the super warm and to our host today. Okay, have a good night and good life.